Welcome to Releasing Your Inner Dragon, where story creators talk story creation. Drake is an award-winning fantasy novelist and creative writing teacher. You can find his epic fantasy series, The Genesis Oblivion, on Kindle Vella. Marie runs a fantasy world-building channel called Just in Time Worlds, and her first book, The Hidden Blade, is available on Kindle Unlimited. We hope you enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome to another episode of Releasing Your Inner Dragon. Today, we are going to talk about how to write politics, how to get your readers involved, how to world build around politics, and how to make a political scene as interesting as possible.
And I know we just did kind of like a world building one, but this is a request from somebody. They want us to go deeper into just the politics side. So, again, if you guys have requests, we're trying to fill them. So send us an email to releasingyourinnerdragon@gmail.com or hit us up on any of our mailing things. All the links are below.
Or you can leave a comment on the YouTube video, and while you're down there, hit the subscribe button. How's that for a segue? That was smooth. You can hit the subscribe button or the like button or the add us to your podcast button.
It really does help us out a lot.
Okay.
Well, so I think that you are probably way stronger than me on writing politics because I just don't write it. Most of my stuff is more fantasy adventure stuff where you're going out. Like in the realm, I actually have one story arc that has a prince, and there's way more politics in that one story arc than I've probably ever written in my life. So what are some things that you like? Because I know Louis is right in there with the whole politics. So what are some of the things that you think about when you're wanting to put the politics into the story and not bore the reader?
So the first most important part about politics is you have to think of it as its own field of battle. There are people in the court who have their own goals. And it doesn't matter whether this is an emperor's court or whether it's a democratic government, or it doesn't matter what kind of government it is. The thing is, you're putting together groups of people. Those people have their own goals. They have assets, like they have friendships that they can draw on. They have power that they can project. They have debts that other people owe them, and they're working towards their goals. In order to have an interesting political environment, you need to have conflict in your political environment. And it doesn't have to be resolved via violence, although violence is one of the expressions of politics, obviously.
Because I think the only political arenas in our world that don't have conflict are because one side killed the other side.
Yes.
So if you got more than one side, you've got conflict.
Exactly.
Because this is power.
Yes.
I mean, no one wants things more than power. And so just like in our world, all the fights in the whole political arenas is all just really for power for those jerks that are way above us.
What you want to do when you're populating your court is you want to understand what factions there are and how they interact with your POV character. So in the Imperial Court in Lumiaron, where Louis goes to, there's a lot of factions, but not all of them interact with him, obviously. So I only drew up enough factions to populate the conflicts that I wanted in that storyline. That doesn't mean there aren't other factions. It just means I'm not going to show them to the reader because it's not important right now.
It's exactly what I said when we were talking about world building. Don't go wide, go deep. Yes. Find out what's going to affect your story and drill down into those. And then the rest of it, just make it superficial. Like, because you're not going to really use it, but you want it to kind of look like it's there. It's like window dressing or a Hollywood fake set where it's a fake wall and there's not actually a building behind it. But from the outside, you can't tell. It looks like there's a building behind it. So yeah, it's always, everything in world building, to me, I always say deep, not wide. Deep, not wide.
So absolutely, you must go deep on the parts that you want there. But it's also important that these factions have got kind of side quests, right? So let's say It is the character's stated goal to change all road signposts from green to white. Okay, for whatever reason, this is their stated goal. Now, they need to get other people on board. They need to convince other people that this is a good idea. And then sufficient people will petition the emperor, and the emperor will make the law, or the law will pass on the floor of the government, or whatever the case is. Doesn't really matter. You need support for the law. Now, in order to do this, you then go and speak to other people. And the dude says, look, I don't really care about your road signs. Your road signs are not important to me. But it is important to me that all hens lay eggs in stick nests. This is important to me. So I need your help to help me ban hay as being made available to chickens to make nests with. Chickens should only have sticks to make nests with. And so you engage in this kind of horse trading, right? Now, if you want to make the plot really engaging, you have these additional elements also be part of your secondary or tertiary plot, like they feed into your plot in some way.
Just in case somebody's ever seen this, I don't even know if the show is still running or not, but Ted Dancing did a show for, I think it was NBC, called Mr. Mayor, where he became the mayor of this, I think it was LA even, or something like that. I only watched a few episodes. It was actually kind of cool, but I've been way too busy to watch TV. And that's why I said, I don't even know if it's even running now. But there was one episode that Ted Dancing's character was going to go away and do some stuff. And his person, who was kind of his right-hand person, which really isn't good enough to do the job, but you know, it's a whole thing about that character. And he told her, while I'm away, get this one thing done. And so the whole episode is her going to, like, she goes to the first guy that actually has it. And he's like, oh man, I would love to do that for you, but my parking pass was revoked. And she's like, if I get you a parking pass. And he's like, yeah, that'd be great. And so she goes to the parking pass woman, and she's like, you know, I'd love to reinstate his parking pass, but the supply closet has been out of staples for like months, and there's no money in the budget to, you know, procure any. And so then she has to ask around, and there is actually a guy in the office just hoarding staples. He's got a whole desk drawer of just staples. And like the whole episode is that, where she finally gets it all done, and she goes back through the chain and like, here's your thing, and here's your thing, and here's your thing. But it was all crazy stuff. Like one of them was they do some type of shout out or something like that in some newsletter or whatever. I don't, like you said, this was years ago. I don't remember all of it. I just remember that it was his daughter's birthday that month, and he wanted her to get the shout out in it. And so she's like, I'll see what I can do. So yeah, that's that. If anybody saw that episode, or if you have access to, I don't know if it's streaming on anything, but Mr. Mayor, that episode was probably the best example of what you're describing that I've ever seen before. Yeah. Obviously a comedy, but exactly what you're saying.
But comedy does it really well. They showcase it really well, how crazy it can get. There's an Asterix and Obelix comics called The 12 Tasks of Asterix, where he has to go through this building that's all bureaucracy, and every time you end up at a window, it's like form 12B, form C8, form, and you're just like, can this bureaucracy stop?
Right.
But
I hate bringing up a show that doesn't exist, but I have written a bunch of it, and the the third episode of Fiend Folly in season 1, we call it the bureaucracy episode, because in the first one it's about them getting together. The second one, they actually go on their first quest. And when they get back to town, they get fined. And they're like, what? And they're like, well, you were heroing without a license. You gotta have a license. Like, and so the whole episode is them going through this whole crappy thing of if I'm gonna be a hero, I've got to get a license. I just want a damn license. So the whole thing is just crazy with that. And I have a couple other pieces like in Guards, which will be coming out hopefully next year. But one of the running gags through season 1 of Guards is the kid shows up on the first, because there's a young guard and an old guard, and the young guard's brand new, and he shows up and he has no weapon, and the other guy's got a poleaxe, and he's like, well, I still got to fill out this form or whatever. And then the next episode, he's just got a stick, just a long pole, and there's no axe. And he's like, yeah, that's a different, I didn't realize it was a different thing. And the next episode, he does have the axe, but it's not attached to the pole. He's just holding both of them. And he's like, I didn't know that I had to put it together myself. And he said, what did you expect? So yeah, comedy does it really well. And it is fun to play with politics in comedy.
It is important, though, to think about the bureaucracy of your court, because bureaucracy absolutely makes the world go round, right? And I mean, yes, when we interact with it, it's annoying. And when you have to, renew your car license or whatever it is that you do, it's frustrating. But all of that bureaucracy is there to maintain the functioning of the court. So if your court is a normal functional court, there is somebody in the background who does things like keep track of noble births, if it's a noble court, like who is the mother, who is the father, what is this child entitled to, what happens when this person dies, all of that kind of thing. There will be some form of title deeds for lands. In England and in Europe during the Middle Ages, one of the main functions of the kind of bureaucracy of the time was heraldic devices. So they would travel around with this wagon from place to place, and establish heraldic devices that families that were entitled to a coat of arms could have. And that's why you have all kinds of weird heraldic devices as people, the first heraldic devices were just like colors, like I paint my shield green. Then now you can't have two people with green shields. So now you put in like a divider and one side's blue and one side's green. And then you start putting in, devices and so on and so forth.
You get some inbred nobleman who his mother is also his aunt. And he's like, you know what I want? I want a chicken, but only the head. And I want to have the body of a turtle and the tail of a phoenix. And they're like, what's a phoenix? I don't know, but it just sounds really cool to me.
It got really, but it was also because, you couldn't have somebody else's heraldic device. So as there were more and more, you had this problem. So, and there was a whole industry that kept track of heraldic devices, that drew heraldic devices, recorded them, and ensured that there was no conflict.
And they did it without the internet, which is crazy.
Yeah, they did it with like traveling and wagons and crap. So it's important to think about that kind of bureaucracy. Like, what is the bureaucracy that keeps your court hanging together? Because that bureaucracy will interact with your player characters. It absolutely will.
I'm a pretty law-abiding person. So my wife is interesting because she literally can't break a law. She literally can't tell a lie. She literally cannot. She does not have the ability. And I live mostly that way until it comes to something that's stupid. That's when I get frustrated. So like the other day I had to get something signed at a bank and it had to be a bank manager. And so I go in there and she was like, well, we don't have the seal anymore. And I'm like, literally the paper says you don't need a seal. I know there's a place for a seal, but right here it says you do not need a seal. You just have to sign it. And she's like, yeah, but without the seal, we just don't do that anymore. And I'm like, just freaking put your name. You just have to sign it. That's all you got to do. It was trying to verify my son. So I was just like, look, here's his passport. There's his face. Sign that you saw his face and it's the same as his passport, which is the name that's on this form. That's it. That's all you have to do. Like, there's nothing official about this. And like, that's the things that really frustrate me. And that's where I went with my comedy. Obviously, those are the funny things, but even not comedy, because we all have to deal with that crap. Yeah. I would recommend that you throw in not just bureaucracy of like, oh, here's the rules and these are all very logical, because most bureaucracy, in my view, yes, it does all that stuff, but it also has crazy stuff that was thrown in that you're like, why is this a rule? Why am I doing this?
I have a document that says that I'm married, as I'm sure most people who are married do. But my document is sealed with a special color of ribbon. I think it's green. And it has a wax seal on it. And it's got two little ribbons on it. Because I had to have a specially notarized document when I moved into the European Union to prove that I'm married, because I wasn't married in a European Union court. So, and they only accept, if you're not in the European Union, if it's not a European Union document, they only accept it if it's notarized by a notary, which is a type of attorney that specializes in validating documents. That's literally their specialization. And they have rules around the color of the ribbon that you use to bind the documents together, and the color of the wax seal, and the stamp that you put on it, and the ribbons in that wax seal.
So luckily in America, to become a notary, it's just like a little test. So there's notaries everywhere in America. They don't have to be a lawyer. They could just be like a bank clerk that just did the test and now they're a notary. And so it's a little less rules, but they do have, they have to do all the IDs on it. And I've done notaries before, and that's never really bothered me. This bothered me because this just happened last week. Like I was really like you can see us anyway. It was just frustrating to me. But
it's frustrating to me too. But yes, so your bureaucracy will absolutely have weird quirks. Okay, and those quirks will be. So those quirks will be from the time before. The reason why the notaries have this freaking stamps and ribbons and crap is because before the internet, before easy communication, the document itself had to serve as its proof. So that color of ribbon means it's this kind of notary that did it. It's this kind of document. It serves as an identification of the document. That's why these rules exist. Your job as when you're world building your court is to make sure that you have those kinds of quirks. So think about, how did they do this, say, before magic? Or how did they do this? Like, how is that impacting my current setup? Try and put some quirks in there, some weirdness in there.
I think it'll add realism and also be something fun that you can kind of, like Joss Whedon always said, you can kick your characters, you can beat your characters, you can kill your characters, but for God's sakes, tell a joke afterwards.
Yes.
So.
And there's a lot of potential for levity in political situations, right? Especially because, like, in a court where you have, say, nobility, and there's all the kind of like people flirting and people, it can get all kinds of crazy. In terms of like, you have an unmarried young man arrive at court and all of the chicks are pretty much like, not even the chicks, their moms are angling to get him into a marriage situation, right?
If he's worth it.
Yeah, because they're marrying the title.
Right.
Yeah? And so it's worth playing into some of those areas to add some humor and some levity to the court situation.
And marrying into like the big stuff is why me and my wife are married. I married a very rich kindergarten teacher, and she married an unemployed writer. So like it was all for the titles. It was kind of an arranged marriage almost.
The other thing that you need to think about is cultural embeddedness. And here is where I think a lot of people go wrong when they're writing politics. So I'm going to bring up an example from a LARP that worked really well in a live action role play that I played in a theater LARP. So we were playing Legend of the Five Rings, which is a samurai-based LARP. And we were having dinner in the LARP, so we all had actual sushi. It was very nice. It was a fully catered LARP and so on. And, as we finished the meal, one of the characters took her chopsticks and she put it upright in her bowl like this, which under the culture, the samurai, the faux samurai culture of the LARP, she was saying that her food had been poisoned, which is an instantaneous accusation to the host, right? So that erupted a series of politics right there at that moment, because now the host is in one hell of a situation. They've just been accused of poisoning, but the woman who made the accusation outranks the host. So you can't say she's lying. So, what do you do? Right. But that only worked because we all knew what the upright chopsticks in the bowl means. Mm-hmm. So if you want to have such a moment pay off in your story, you have to seed it beforehand. You have to seed those cultural references beforehand so that they can pay off in the story.
I love that you use seeded, because when I'm teaching plot device, and this is any plot device, I don't care what it is, I always say that you have to be a farmer for plot devices. You have to plant it. You have to tend it at least once. If you can tend it twice or even 3 times, that's great, before you can reap it. So, like with your example, you have to plant that somehow organically the audience learns about this chopstick thing. And then if you can bring it up one more time organically, without, not this end result, but just somewhere else, you want to do that to kind of reinforce it. And then you can reap it. But just think like a farmer. You have to plant and then sow and then reap. Is that tend? I'm sorry, plant, tend, and reap.
And a good way to do that planting in politics is to lean into the entertainment that your nobles participate into. So politics gives you the opportunity to really lean on your entertainment. So George R.R. Martin does it with the tournaments that he uses, and he builds that whole mystery night culture there. But you can pull on a lot more than just the physical tournaments. You can have like a shadow play where they use this device of accusing somebody of poison by standing your chopsticks upright, right? So your people can be watching this play, discussing something, and then see the performers using this device.
And that's very organic, because the rich people are the ones that have the leisurely time. So they have the time to play the weird card game that costs so much money, or the tile game, or the, whatever. So yeah, that is an amazing thing that you can use for that.
The other thing to think about is your art. I mean, we tend to think that people hang paintings on their walls because they're pretty, because that's how we think about, we put things on our walls that are pretty because we think they're pretty. But that's not how the decision was made to put an item on a wall in a court scene. Tapestries carried the banner of the Duke. They carried his devices, they carried his animals, they carried his colors. And what you want to do in a court is you want to kind of emphasize that and lean into it and use those things to further world build and create those payoff moments. So put your religion on the walls. Things that you want to show about the religion, put them on the walls. So
just to add to that, so I've been lucky that I've had a lot of really amazing mentors. One was Aaron Alston. He was a Star Wars writer. And I met him only about maybe a year and a half before he passed, maybe 2 years before he passed. But I got a lot from him. He was an amazing writer, an amazing mentor, an amazing, all around human. But one of the things he said to me, because in my first book, I didn't pay attention to, and this just adds to what you're saying. He said, what have you written costume wise that a fan could dress like? And I was like, I don't really design clothing. And he's like, right, I know, I've read it. That's bad. You need to make sure, and this is the same thing with what you're talking about with the wall stuff and everything like that. It's like, you need to make sure that you are actually putting things in there that can be used for cosplay, or can be used for, a role-playing game, or can be used for something that outside of your story, because that's going to help grow your IP and also, just make it more entertaining and more realistic and everything like that. Probably one of the best pieces of advice any of my mentors gave me. And it was just a simple little thing of, he's like, did you describe a brooch, or just, you have your sashes, just whatever. And so I think a lot of people, I did, and me in my career, I didn't do that at all, because I don't want to design a dress. What the heck? I want to write blood and gore and monsters and all of that. But it really, especially epic fantasy, where the readers do want more detail and do want more information about this world, and they do want to be immersed deeper into this world. So yeah, that is absolutely paramount, that you think about that and think about the fact of how they actually dealt with their artwork.
And you actually segue me very nicely into the clothing. So one of the things that somebody pinged me on early on was, they were like, but Louis is an assassin. why does he notice how people dress? Because Louis does. In his POV characters, he notices how people dress. I was like, because he's also a nobleman. Clothing matters. It matters how people are dressed. It matters what colors they're dressed in. It matters how much their sashes are emphasized in my world. So it's also very important to think about how people identify rank. I used sashes for that reason, because I liked the versatility it gave me. I liked the real estate it gave me, because it gave me the whole chest to work with in terms of putting blazons onto it, right? But we've had identification of rank going back to forever. I mean, if you look up church liturgy, right, the Roman Catholic Church liturgy, you will find like there were special rings that bishops wear. There's special this that the Pope wears. There's robes, there's stoles, there's all kinds of stuff. So it's important to think about how people wear. And then I did a whole video on sumptuary laws, what people are allowed to wear based on their rank, which is also like, this was a reality in all of our courts.
And not only that, it also can be a shorthand for you, because once you teach the reader something, you can literally shorthand it by just saying, oh, and he noticed, this gem on his ring. Well, I've already been taught that that gem means this. So, wow, okay, now I'm intrigued. What's that guy doing here? And I don't have to say to the reader what he is. I don't have to say why there's conflict, because I've already set that up. I've already, made sure that the audience 100% knows that this means that. And so when it comes up again in the story, I don't have to go into this huge detail.
And you can even use it in a shorthand, because what I do with my sashes is, once I've established to the reader that you can read somebody's sash and identify their rank and duchy, I will sometimes just work that into the description without bothering to describe their sash, because the reader knows that Louis can do this. They know that Louis can look at somebody's sash and be like, he's from such and such a duchy and this is his rank. So it becomes a shorthand.
Yeah.
So clothing really does matter, and so does your art and the kind of semblance of your court. The one other thing that you need to pay attention to, and the only way that I've found to be able to make this understandable to the reader, is to have the POV character be thinking about what they're saying and hearing, and that is in-world references. Let's say that in your world you have resurrection, for argument's sake. Yeah? For whatever reason, like people can come back from the dead because you're based on a video game world or whatever. But when this happens to nobility, people don't say they died. They say that he was gravely injured, but he recovered, right? You need to, the first, second, probably third time that reference comes up, you need to teach the reader that gravely injured means the dude was dead in a coffin and somebody resurrected him. Like, that's what they're actually saying.
So it's been too long. I can't pull it up exactly because I read it a long time ago, but Brandon Sanderson's very first book was Elantris. And the gist is that randomly people would get this weird skin disease, and then they'd be thrown into this city that was basically a jail. And the prince, I think that's what he was, ended up waking up one morning with it. And so they didn't admit that he had this thing and had to be thrown into this thing. They literally just said, oh yeah, no, he died last night. Because again, it was about saving face. It was about, kind of that thing. And so, yeah, that's, you do have to think about, especially when you get up to this level. I'd love to start pulling some examples out of our world, but I just don't want to go there. But at this level, they will do some pretty heinous things that we wouldn't do. Like, they'll have a tragedy happen to them in their life and they'll use it for political gain, when the rest of us will be like, oh my God, your child died. Why don't you just take time off and just go freaking grieve? And they're actually using it to make them more powerful. And it's like, wow, that's really sick and twisted. But I mean, that's the type of person that's attracted A lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times that's the person that's attracted to politics, is because maybe they aren't a great warrior. They aren't, a huge mage or an intelligent scholar or something like that. They're, more of the lesser quality human beings on the planet. And I just feel like those are the ones that get attracted to politics.
They often do get attracted to politics, and they often do end up there. And it is also important to think about populating your court with all sorts. And this, to me, is the hardest thing. Politicians must be unreasonable. If your politics is solved by having a reasonable conversation, you lose all conflict. If I can sit down with you and work out the political differences and decide the best way forward for the kingdom, we can both come up with a joint vision. You've just lost all the conflict in the story, all of it. Therefore, like
you've also literally, done something that's not realistic in any human society, which is unfortunate, really, really unfortunate.
Yeah. So your politicians have to take unreasonable, and I mean by politicians, I mean courtiers, whatever, I mean noblemen. They have to take unreasonable positions that they believe are justified.
I don't even think I'm gonna add something, because I don't think you have to be justified. It has to be justified, sure, that's one way, but it could also be just, I'm gonna fight for this even though it's wrong, but it gets me power. It gets me something personal that I don't care that I'm destroying everything else. And I know it's illogical, and I know it's probably the worst thing I'm doing for the people, but it gives me something. And so again, that goes back to these are not usually the best people in the world.
They're not the best people. So, but 100%. So you can flip it around and do it, and have them do it, the illogical thing because they're impersonal, or you can have them be a true believer. And you should ideally populate your court with a mixture of both. So you should have some snake oil salesmen, some genuinely trying to do the right thing people, and some hardcore fanatics.
And you literally just described politics in America.
Well, ideally, that's what you want in your court. And then you want to have that interaction kind of bubble. But it is also important to be able to mingle your court scenes, your heavy politics scenes, with not so heavy politics. So either have entertainment scenes, where they're doing physical entertainment, participating in something. Sometimes it's also worth just summarizing a day at court. Like I will sometimes use this device where I'm like, okay, it is after the day at court, and it's our group of heroes sitting together discussing the day at court, giving the reader what had happened and what they learned without actually trying to show it, because it would just be too much and too intense to show all of that.
Or you've already gone similarly in a different part of the book or whatever.
Exactly.
That's why I always say, with show don't tell, you will still want to tell.
Yes.
And especially on something that you're just going to be repeating a bunch of stuff that the reader has already gone through, already knows. Don't do that. Just, as I always say, and then he took a bus to Chicago. Like, I don't need to see it.
And that's it exactly. So sometimes it is worth just telling and summarizing what's going on, rather than showing every single thing in politics, because it is easy to get bogged down in politics. And I think that, like, I love George R.R. Martin's court, but occasionally I think that he goes too long in the court scenes, because he is showing so much of the court. And I sometimes wish, George, just tell me, just summarize for me what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that I don't enjoy his court scenes, because I do, but he does sometimes go over long in the scenes. Those are kind of my big thoughts around politics. Work with your plot devices. Make sure that people understand the cultural references you're going to use. Make sure you've got conflict. Make sure you have court entertainment that you can also use to showcase with, and sprinkle other things into your political chapters. Don't just do, chapter after chapter of the court. You're going to, I mean, that's intense. you're going to lose readers. And really, you've got to think about building your courts. You've got to think about things like what shows rank, who outranks who. If you have a lot of money, but you don't have a lot of rank, how does that make you work in this court? Does it matter? You know, can you buy rank, or is rank determined in some other way? What happens to people who don't have noble rank, but yet are at the court? So like, for example, what happens with your religion? So are your religious leaders, are they involved in the court? Because they probably would be. They used to be. Separation of the church and state is a very new thing. It used to be a very intertwined thing, church and state. So are they there? Do they hold rank? What kind of power do they hold? And of course, you know, when the church and the government come into conflict, you end up with absolutely beautiful things like the king declaring himself the head of the new religion, a la Henry VIII.
The beautiful thing about having, you know, the religious side of the house in court as well is I can't think of a time where they had the same goals. They had the same desires for an outcome. And that's just natural conflict right there, where, I mean, even let's say everybody was 100% doing the right thing and doing good. The king would still want, or the emperor, or the politician, whatever, would still want what's best for the people. But the religious guy would still want what's best for the religion, you know, whatever that is, even if they're both 100% good and they're both doing good things, even that would be conflict. But we all know that you're never going to get that situation. So there's always going to be somebody doing something underhanded. And so that just adds to the conflict. And that's really what it is. I mean, I say this all the time. It's drama. You know, it's so I've had so many of my clients or whatever, they'll say, I'll read a chapter and I go, why didn't you have this? I mean, you had it all set up. Why didn't you take it here? And they go, well, I didn't want to take it that far. I don't want to affect the reader that much. And I'm like, it's literally your job. Like it's drama. It's about that. It's about taking it to 11, as I always say, when we're plotting with the realm guys. You know, we throw stuff out and we'll come up with an idea that all four of us are like, oh my God, that's great. We're going to do that. And I go, yeah, that is great. We're going to do that. How could we go to 11 on that? And they're already like, well, we're already at 14. I'm like, well, okay, but now 14 is 10. So how can we go to 11? And so it's always about that, you know, what can I do to push this even higher? Because tension, drama, conflict, that is the meat that the readers are consuming. That is the tasty, you know, corn syrup, whatever. I don't know. I ate pretty good. Yeah. So whatever is on all these sugary things that make you want to eat them. I want to say corn syrup is one of them. I don't even know what corn syrup is. That's what it is. That's what's going to really attract them to it.
And that's exactly right. And in politics, where a lot of it is dialogue and people talking and people interacting non-verbally, sometimes it can be very easy to lose that thread of tension. So you really have to keep, putting the punch into it in terms of driving, like, will they, won't they reach a point here?
So what I've kind of told people when I'm teaching them, first of all, you have to know you. So like, I know me. I don't like politics. Politics bore the crap out of me. So what I do, my metric when I'm dealing with, you know, a more political scene, I don't mind if I get a little bored with it, because I know that I'm bored literally when we walk in the door. But I use that as my gauge of, okay, that's it. I'm now don't want to do anymore. So I don't want my readers to do anymore. The problem is in the other side. If you freaking love everything about whatever it is, and you know, like, that's what I have to do with me on combat scenes. I am famous for writing combat scenes. I love writing combat scenes. I am very graphic in writing combat scenes. There's a ton of emotion in combat scenes, but I can get a little carried away. Like I can spend way too long in a fight. And so, you know, I have to do the other thing. So if you love politics and you're like, oh my God, politics is everything, I'm gonna write 300,000 words of just political scenes. So you're gonna have to then go, okay, I do like this more than most people. So if I start getting giddy it probably means that I've gone too far. Like if your web toes are twiddling, then that's a good indication that yeah, everybody else is going to be bored at this point, because I'm the only one that's going to be excited at this point. And so you have to self-regulate. You have to self-decide that, okay, these are the things that really, really interest me. I want to make sure I don't overdo them. I mean, a great example, when I was writing for Sony. So I think I've told the story, so I'll be quick, but I grew up studying lock picking and safe cracking. And it was something I shouldn't have, because it got me in trouble as a young man, but like, it was something I was very interested in. And it has been a part of my life in 25 years. And then there was a story in Sony where I had to write a scene where a guy picked the lock, and I just nailed it. It was so freaking amazing. It was so awesome. And I sent it into my editor, and he was like, why is there 3 pages of a guy picking a lock? And I was like, oh, right. No one likes that as much as me, do they? So I ended up cutting it down to like 2 paragraphs. But it was the best lock picking scene you would ever have read in your life. But it was too much. And I got swept up in it. I was so excited because it was something from my childhood. And I'm like, oh my goodness, all this knowledge that I gained as a teenager, I could put it in this. And I just forgot that, again, you've got to self-regulate. And that's just, you have to know yourself.
And that's absolutely true for politics. If you get caught up in a scene and you just keep writing and writing and writing, you're going to lose your readers, because it's going to be dialogue heavy, which is always kind of dicey. And it's going to be in culture references, double speak, complicated negotiations that honestly, like 90% of your readers don't actually want to read that level of politics.
Right.
So
unless, now there is a genre for everybody. There is, dino porn exists, and it sells really well in the dino porn market. Now, it's not a very big market, but it is a market, and it does exist. So there is going to be a market for you. You can find a market that just wants nothing but insane. My oldest child will be your biggest fan. Like, I don't know how I failed so badly in raising him, and how he just is all into politics. I mean, my fear is he's going to grow up and be a a politician, and that's just going to, like, can't you just be like a bank robber or like anything else I'll be more proud of than if you're a politician? But like, he's all into it. But yeah, so we're not saying don't write a book. You just have to make the conscious decision that you're actually shooting for a very specific target audience. And if that's your target audience and you think you can reach them, then, go for it. And the nice thing about going in smaller genres, smaller circles is what I call them, you can be a much bigger fish, even though you haven't changed size. So like, I tell this story all the time. I got a friend that had a very successful book, decade or a half ago or so, called 50 Gay Friendly Vacation Places. Now, that means his audience, first of all, they have to be gay. Second of all, they have to be going on vacation. Like, that's a pretty niche market at that point. And he really did really well with that book. So you can absolutely go for a niche market. Just, you have to make that decision. But if you're like, oh no, this is great for the mass market epic fantasy, and they're going to love these 300,000 words of political intrigue. Yeah, they're not. They're really not.
Like, epic fantasy fans like some politics. They like to see the court. They like to see some drama, but not that much.
Right.
Do you have any final thoughts on politics?
And that's why I let you just take the lead in this one, because you know it way better than me. You think about it more than I do. Again, the only times I really play with it is in the comedy. I don't like my serious stuff. Most of my stories, I like to write stories about farmers that are doing extraordinary things, or peasants that are doing extraordinary things, or something like that. And I think you literally, everything you said, I'm just going, and it's several things you said, I was like, man, I never even thought about that. Like, that's a really interesting thing that I'm going to have to, because, still plotting out this kind of princely story and all that. So there's some things that you said that made me go, I can add that there, and I can do this there. And that's what this is all about. It's about a dialogue. It's a discussion. Nobody knows everything. And so the more you listen to this, the more you discuss this, the more you get involved in the industry and get involved with other writers. That's why I'm such a huge supporter of writers groups. Again, I feel if you are not in a writers group, you are not a writer. You're a typist. You must get out there. You must let other people read your writing. You must have these discussions. You know, it's just vital. It's how you grow as a writer. And so
Absolutely.
hopefully you guys got the same, you know, the same out of this, because this was really, really good. And I knew it would be. You know, I don't really have anything other than that, other than to say, freaking amazing job, Marie.
Thanks. And I hope that you guys also enjoyed today's session on my thoughts around writing politics. And we will see you soon for another one.
Bye.